I'm really happy that I started the game, but I'm really sad that we lost the game.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And today's podcast is also brought to you by Brent Namias, who is today's Patreon sponsor. So if you want to be a Patreon sponsor, head across to patreon.com/redrock_bball. My name is Josh Lloyd, and as always, you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. A little bit of a different feel to the show today. I am recording this at halftime of the Oklahoma City Los Angeles Clippers game because I have to. I've got tickets to go out to the Melbourne Stars cricket game tonight, and if I do that, by the time I get home, it's going to be halfway through Tuesday for you guys in America. By the time the podcast gets recorded and posted, so I thought I'll get it out. We won't include the Clippers and Thunder game for awards and for monstrous lines of the night and all that sort of stuff. The perfect DFS line will be missing, but everything else will be there. The preview for tomorrow's games, the review of all 8 other games on MLK Day, but had to decide what was the best way to do it, whether the podcast comes out 7-8 hours late or I just skip half a game, and that's the way that I decided to go. So, of course,
let's get to it.
All right, let's get to it indeed, and we'll start off with the monstrous line of the night. And that goes to Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors. Green had himself a triple-double, but it wasn't just a triple-double. Well, it was a triple-double. It was 11, 13, and 11, but he added 1 steal. He had 5 blocks, and he went 4 of 6 from the field and 3 of 4 from the free throw line. It's the first triple-double in the NBA this season that included 5 blocks, so obviously a huge performance there from Draymond. And over the last 2 weeks, Draymond is averaging under 10 points a game, but you shouldn't care about that, because if you drafted Draymond, you knew that the scoring was going to come down, and it's down almost 3.5 points per game this year. But what is happening is he's getting, over these last 2 weeks, 9 assists a game, 2 blocks a game, almost 2 steals, and almost 9 rebounds a game. He is shooting a very disappointing percentage though, 43% from the field and only 45% from the field for the year, and that's down from 49 last year. So he isn't quite the same player that he was last year. He's still ranked 16th on the season though, and providing value in those categories, which can be difficult to get, but we preach this heading into the season. If you're drafting Draymond in that second round, you should be looking at either a punt point situation, or you need to be stacking up with points in your first, third, fourth, and probably fifth pick, trying to get 20-point scorers there to try and deal with Draymond's lack in that category, because it is a significant lack considering majority of the other guys in the top 20 are 20-point scorers. So getting a guy scoring 10 is quite a dip, I guess, or quite a gully to fight back from. But a huge game from Draymond in the Warriors, absolute smashing of the Cavs. They had that game done. It felt like in about 5 minutes, but still put up such a huge line, which is obviously awesome for his fantasy owners and for DFS owners as well. The waiver wire line of the night goes to Emmanuel Mudiay of the Denver Nuggets. Mudiay had 18 points. He hit 2 triples. He had 2 rebounds, and he had a career-high 13 assists. He had 2 steals, he had a block, and the best thing from Mudiay, not just the career high in assists, but the fact that he had 50% from the field, 6 of 12 shooting, and hit all 4 of his free throws. He has been a pretty significant disappointment so far this year, and he is just a punt field goal guy, but you take his field goal percentage out of the equation, then he's a must-own player. He's had stretches where he's had limits on his minutes due to Michael Malone spreading the time out with him and Jameer Nelson, but he is still averaging for the year 12.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, 4 assists. But you want more assists. But the good news is the last 5 games, 7 assists a game. The bad news is 33% shooting. But as I said, you're punting that category if you own Emmanuel Mudiay. So if he's on your waiver wire, you're not adding him unless you are losing that category each week. And if you are losing that category each week or pretty much every week, then adding him can be an interesting guy to have a look at, especially with Gaz Harris hurting his ankle again today. And what that means, yes, they play different positions, but if Harris goes down and has to miss some time, which looks likely at this point, that means that Jameer Nelson plays more at the 2, meaning there are more minutes for Moutier at the 1. Whereas if Barton and Harris are healthy at shooting guard, then Nelson has most of his minutes come behind Moutier, and there's more of a risk of them splitting time. But if Nelson's taking a lot of playing time over at shooting guard, then there's more minutes for Moutier to play at point guard, which could happen for the next week or so. But Moutier has that value. The encouraging thing is the last 2 games have been fantastic. 13.5 points, 10 assists, 2 triples, 2 steals on 47% shooting. Yeah, fantastic. And the other great thing about Moutier is he's taken his free throws from 67% last year to 79%. That's a real showing of growth. It's a real showing of improvement in shooting. It hasn't translated to his on-court numbers. Well, I suppose it has, because he's a 36% shooter last year and he's 38 this year. But it's not a huge increase. But getting that free throw percentage increase is a big start, and hopefully he can start to get it together. The minutes and the minutes split is somewhat of a worry, though, for Moutier. We've seen that happen to him numerous times, but hopefully we can get a little bit of consistency out of him down the stretch here. But a nice game from him in another Nuggets throttling. Speaking of Nuggets throttling, the young gun of the night, of course, is Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets. Jokic had 30 points. He had 11 rebounds. He had 5 assists. He also chimed in with a 3-pointer. He had 3 steals, and he played 36 minutes with only 2 fouls. In fact, the last 3 games, Jokic has combined for 5 fouls. And that's fantastic, given that how much of a pain in the ass the fouls were for him and how limiting they were for him early on. He has been out of control recently. He is, over the last 2 weeks, the number 6th ranked player. Not in per 36 numbers, the number 6th ranked player in the entire NBA over the last 2 weeks in just 30 minutes a game. He has got a true shooting of 73% over that time, 66 from the field, 83 from the line. He's averaging 22 and 10 with 5.5 assists, a 3 and 1.5 steals, and half a block. Again, I said it in the preseason, if he gets 33 minutes, he'll be a top 15 player. Maybe I looked like I undershot it. Is he a top 10 guy in 33 minutes a night consistently? Well, the numbers recently say yes. Let's hope that he can keep himself out of foul trouble. As for the shooting, yeah, it's ridiculously high, but this is not like a jump shooter who is getting hot and sticking at 58% or stuff like that. This is a guy who just does convert at really high percentages. He's shooting 59% from the field for the entire season. And it is a little bit elevated over the last 2 weeks, but it just feels like when he shoots, he gets such easy looks that they're just never going to miss. He has been ludicrous. Yes, his 3-pointers over the last 2 weeks are at 57%. That probably won't continue. But his ability to get assists, his ability to score, to rebound, the percentages are absolutely fantastic. And you know how much I love this guy. I think he's going to be a real star in the NBA, and people don't talk about him quite enough. I think that he's right up there with Porzingis and Towns and Embiid as the core 4, I guess, of bringing the NBA as being the young stars, along with Giannis, who's, I think he's a year older perhaps, but not much. So those 5 guys have got so much talent and so much excitement to come from them in the coming seasons. But Jokic was ridiculous yet again, and there are times when you watch him and you think that he's just not able to be stopped with some of his ability to get passes going and to do some of the stuff he does offensively. Really, really great stuff once again from Nik Jokic. Let's move on now to the dud of the night, and it is another big man, and it's Marcin Gortat of the Washington Wizards. Wasn't a great night from Gortat. He played just 27 minutes, but this was a significantly large blowout. 6 and 6 for Gortat with 2 blocks. His numbers have been okay recently, but not fantastic. Down to 80th over the last 2 weeks, averaging 11 and 11, which is nice. But his upside is really limited. He's the 66th ranked player this season, and if Yamahimi ever comes back, it is going to bite into what Gortat can do. But at this point, it seems like we're just never going to see Mahimi until fantasy playoffs are pretty much well over and done. So he's going to have this nice, solid role for a consistent amount of time, but he's just is such a low usage player, such a low upside guy that he's sort of stuck where he is, and that's absolutely fine. But this game wasn't a good one, but also the blowout nature meant that he didn't have to play those 38, 39 minutes that Scott Brooks so loves giving him, so that limited what he was able to do there as well. All right, let's move in now and talk about these games in a little bit of extra detail. The first game we want to take a look at is the Atlanta Hawks and the New York Knicks. The Hawks get the victory 108-107. Dennis Schroeder, after two subpar performances, bounces back here. 34 minutes, 28 points on 13 of 16 shooting with 3 assists. This is why I wasn't worried about the fact that Malcolm Delaney had played down the stretch for him in the last 2 games in the fourth quarter. It didn't really bother me at all. I didn't think that Delaney was stealing that job of him. Huge performance from Schroeder. And this is 2 big games in a row from Kent Bazemore. 32 minutes from Baze, 16, 6 and 5, 2 triples and a steal. He was inefficient as he always is, but some nice numbers. This is something I mentioned yesterday. He's been horrible, but he does have that ability to sneak into a top 100 spot. So if you want to take a flyer on him, absolutely worth a look. Timmy Hardaway Jr., he is as up and down as they come in terms of minutes. He was up to 35 in this one, started in place of Dwight Howard, who was out for rest. So we saw Hardaway start 35 minutes, 20 points, had 4 assists, had a steal, hit 2 triples. But as is always the case with big Tim Hardaway lines, it comes on very, very hot shooting. He went 9 of 16 here. Look, he is a top 100 guy over the last couple of weeks. I don't believe he's an absolute must-own 12-team league guy. I think you can likely do better, but no problem if you own him. Just be aware that you're going to have sometimes weeks where he shoots 30% from the field and averages 7 points, or other weeks where he gets 18 points on 60% shooting. That's sort of just what he does. He has been able to improve some of the other areas of his game this year, especially his ball handling, and playing as a point guard at times has obviously helped that. Paul Millsap's shot was horrific, 2 of 18 and 6 of 10 from the line, so big negatives there, but a massive stat line otherwise. 39 minutes, 17, 7 and 6, 3 steals, 3 blocks in his start at centre, and with Dwight Howard out and Mike Muscala out, Chrissy Humphries went for 14 and 7 with 3 triples in 24 minutes for Humphries. Mike Dunleavy, who had been hot in his first 2 games, was not in this one. 19 minutes for Dunleavy, 0 points, missed all 5 of his shots, and that's why I think that Dunleavy's just a guy for the very, very deep leagues. DeAndre Bembry missed this one again for personal reasons. He has missed a lot of games this season due to personal reasons. I don't know what the personal reasons are, but it's curious that so many times this year Bembry has been ruled out due to personal issues. So hopefully everything's okay with him and his family, but it has not been a great little stretch of time here for Bembry. Onto the Knicks. No Kristaps Porzingis. No Lance Thomas, who's suffering that facial fracture, and he's going to miss about a week's worth of action. So the Knicks went with Mindaugas Kuzminskas as a starter, something that I did mention could be a possibility yesterday. 38 minutes for Kuzminskas, 14 and 5 with 2 steals. He's been playing fantastically well recently. It was so much better than what we saw from him earlier on this season. And with Thomas out for the next week and Porzingis maybe missing a couple more games, Kuzminskas is probably a 14-team league ad. I don't really think that he's a strong 12-team league ad, but he has been putting up much improved numbers. He's shooting the ball much better than I thought he would as well. Big game from Joakim Noah, 7 and 17 with 3 assists, a steal and 2 blocks. Jeff Hornacek. My name is Jeff. He does tend to give Noah more minutes when Porzingis is out, apart from the times when he doesn't and then confuses us all. But he does tend to do that with Noah. And while Porzingis is out, then Noah does have some appeal for standard leagues. While Melo responded to the Charlie Rosen article by scoring 30 points on just 16 shots with 7 boards. So a big Melo performance. Jeff Hornacek also ruffled a few feathers, and the Knicks are an absolute shit show at the moment, to be honest. He demoted Courtney Lee. He demoted Courtney Lee to the bench to start Ron Baker. Not to start Brandon Jennings, not to start Justin Holiday, but to start Ron Baker. Now, Baker played 22 minutes and had 12 points with 4 triples and 2 steals, and he has handled himself fairly well this season. I don't think that we're looking to add Baker anywhere outside of probably 30-team leagues, but he's handled himself well. As for Lee, didn't play at all in the second half and didn't take to his benching very well. He, after the game, posted a couple of Dumb and Dumber pictures on his Instagram feed, deleted those, had some quotes where he was questioning the decision, said, it's the coach's decision, but didn't make a huge amount of sense to me. that sort of stuff. He was saying how that Hornacek wanted him to play with Brandon Jennings because they had a nice play the game before and he liked their chemistry. Lee is not a great player. Ron Baker's also not a great player. So this demotion for Courtney Lee doesn't really affect your ideas on him in 12-team leagues. It probably does in 14-team leagues where he would have been just hanging onto a roster spot. But interesting to see how this goes for him. Brandon Jennings was obviously not impressed with the rotational decisions either. Both guys saying a similar thing, which I say often, is that when you go into games not knowing what your role's going to be, who you're going to play with, what's going to be happening in the game, it's hard to get into a rhythm. It's hard to get set, and that's what Hornacek seems to be doing all the time, and that's exactly, and I don't remember if it was Jennings or Lee that said that, but one of them said that, and it's totally true. And the same thing happened with the backup center, as I mentioned, and I always mention with Hornacek, whenever a backup center plays well, they're almost guaranteed to be eliminated from the rotation the next game. Billy Hernangomez went for 8 and 13 in the last game. This game, DNP CD, because why not? Kyle O'Quinn got 16 minutes and went 6 and 8, and being able to judge what Hernangomez and O'Quinn are going to do is a really tough prospect. Hernangomez is deep 20-team league maybe at best. O'Quinn's a solid 14 to 16-team league guy, and there's a clear pecking order of Noah, O'Quinn, and then Hernangomez, but it still doesn't mean that it's not locked in and set in stone in that sort of a situation, which is a pain in the ass trying to work out exactly what you're going to do with guys in deeper leagues, which is obviously it can be frustrating, especially given how well O'Quinn has been able to play this year in his limited minutes. I think that's all we need to discuss with that game. Let's move on to the next one. It's Portland and Washington. There's really not a huge amount to discuss here. This was a massive, massive blowout. Dame Lillard had 22 and 7 in 28 minutes, but the game was over so quick. Yeah, CJ McCollum only played 23 minutes here, scoring 12 points. Mo Harkless played 19 minutes. We had 11 minutes of Jake Layman, 5 minutes of Pat Connaughton, and even Myers Leonard played 22 minutes. So delving too far into this Blazers mess is not going to really help anything for fantasy purposes. It was just a smashing. Nobody played big minutes, so not a lot to really care about or consider. For the Wizards, Markieff Morris, he's on a real tear at the moment. He's a top 50 player over the last 2 weeks, Markieff, and only owned it in 74% of leagues. That means some of you in 10-team leagues, he's floating around. Maybe 12-teamers, I would be doubtful, but maybe. 17 and 13 for Morris, 5 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. He was efficient. He only played 33 minutes, and he's crushing it. He's been a guy that I was pretty big on basically all off-season, and he started off the season okay, but nothing spectacular. But now he's really rolling. He's playing a lot of minutes, and he's doing a lot of scoring and some defensive stuff as well. Brad Beal and Johnny Wall both scored over 20 points in less than 30 minutes, and that's probably the most important stat there. And interesting to me that Tomas Satoransky played 19 minutes. He had a double-double. He went 10 and 10 with 3 assists and a steal and a three-pointer, but he didn't play point guard at all. He shared the court with Trey Burke for the entirety of his playing time, bar 1 minute. So he was playing the 2 behind Beal. Marcus Thornton's terrible. And Satoransky's better than McClellan, so it'd be interesting to see if he can keep this role. I believe that he can, but I've got pretty high hopes of him being an impactful guy at some point in the future. For now, Satoransky's value comes up to 20-team leagues at this point, but this is 2 games in a row now. Yeah, they've both been blowouts, but he was in the first quarter. He was like the first sub off the bench in this game, so that should give you an indication of where he's currently sitting in Scott Brooks' rotation. Kelly Oubre had 18 points in 28 minutes with 3 triples, so a good night from Oubre, but really hard to consider him even sneaking into 12-team league value at any point this season. Let's move on to the next one, which is Philadelphia and Milwaukee. The process, Joel Embiid was back in a big way. 22 and 12 in 28 minutes for Embiid, 2 steals and 5 blocks, and went to the line 18 times. Unfortunately, he hit just 13 of them, so it ends up being a sizable negative in that category, but just getting to the line that many times is huge, and obviously putting up those defensive numbers, a really fantastic performance from Joel. There was no Nerlens Noel, who was out with a ankle issue, and TJ McConnell was out with his wrist problem, so Sergio Rodriguez made the start for McConnell. 32 minutes for Spanish Chocolate, 10, 7, and 6 in those 32 minutes. Now, what does this mean? It doesn't appear that McConnell's going to be out long term, so I'm not rushing to grab Rodriguez. But we have to remember the reason Rodriguez lost the starting job was because of injury. It wasn't that he was benched for form. He was injured. McConnell came in and played well. Yeah, Rodriguez was good here. He wasn't spectacularly good, so I don't know if McConnell gets this job back. I would still hold because I think we're going to find out pretty soon. I think McConnell's likely back for the next game, but it'll be interesting to see exactly how they handle this situation. Bob Cove only the 28 minutes, and this is becoming more commonplace for Robert Covington to play under 30. It's about 3 or 4 in a row as they give more minutes to Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot. Now, Covington's still putting up good numbers, 11, 5, and 4, 2 steals and 2 blocks, so still got great numbers, but his upside is a little bit limited by them knocking 2, 3, 4 minutes off his playing time. As for Luwawu-Cabarrot, 17 minutes for 4 and 3, and nothing too exciting there, while Ersan Ilyasova had 12 points, but it did take him 14 shots to get there, and he played 28, while Dario Saric had 17, 9, and 4 in 24 minutes. Saric has played a lot better over the last 4 to 6 weeks. It makes him more a 16-team league guy, but he's a fair distance away from being a 12-team guy. Jahlil Okafor played 20 minutes in the Nerlens Noel role. He had 10 and 2. I don't think Okafor should be owned in any leagues. No, that's a bad statement, Josh. I don't think Jahlil Okafor should be owned in any 12-team leagues or 10-team leagues. And here's the reason. Yes, you can talk about a trade, right? Okay, so we feel like a trade is coming. We don't know who that player is who's going to be traded. It could be Nerlens Noel. It feels like more it's going to be Okafor now. But it could be Noel. So if we assume that Nerlens Noel gets traded, Okafor plays 20 minutes a night, not ownable. If nobody gets traded, Okafor out of the rotation, not ownable. If Okafor gets traded, what team does he go to that plays him 30 minutes a night that makes him a top 100 player? That's the question. Does he go to another team where he slots in there and plays 30 minutes a night? And I would have to say that the chances of that are less than 50%. So we're talking about 50%. There's 3 scenarios, and even in the one scenario that works in his favor, there's probably a less than 50% chance of that actually working in his favor. So we're talking about a scenario where we're looking at 16% chance of that actually working out. So holding and stashing Okafor, it's really not in your favor. The odds aren't in your favor that it's going to work out into some genius sort of move moving forward. So that's the way that you might see it in a different way, and I'd love to hear the way you see it as well. But that's the way that I see this situation with Okafor. Chasen Randall had 10 points in 16 minutes. He moved into the backup point guard spot with TJ McConnell out. So a nice night from Randall. He's acquitted himself very well. Remember, he was on the Knicks this preseason, but broke his eye, so they decided to cut him. Instead, went into the season with Ron Baker as their third string point guard, who's not even really a point guard. For the Bucks, Yanni, 23 and 6, 2 steals and 3 blocks. This is a huge win for the Sixers, by the way, on the road against the Bucks, and the Bucks would be pissed that they didn't get this victory. Jabari had 23 and 5. Actually, back on Giannis, he fouled out. That's why his minutes were limited. He only played 29. Jabari had 23 and 5 with 2 steals and 2 triples. He has been somewhat of a revelation this season. But this is the second consecutive game that Jason Kidd has played John Henson more minutes than Greg Monroe. I was feeling pretty good about Monroe, but I've always put the caveat out there. Jason Kidd is the coach, so dumb shit can happen, and dumb shit is happening. 26 minutes for John Henson, 8, 5, and 4 with 2 blocks. He just looked like a kid really up against Embiid. He looks so small. He has no fantasy appeal outside of 20-team leagues. As for Monroe, just the 21 minutes here, 14 and 6 with 2 assists and a steal. So still nice numbers, still should be held on to. They ran with Malcolm Brogdon at 28 minutes at point guard, and Daly played 21. That's a split that I like. 11, 2, and 6 with 2 steals for Brogo, while Daly had 8, 1, and 4. There should be no situation where Dellavedova gets more minutes than Brogdon moving forward, but this is Jason Kidd. Mick Beasley played 26 minutes. It wasn't a great night, but 7, 6, and 2 is important. The 26 minutes is important, and that makes him someone that is absolutely worth looking at in 14-team leagues. Jason Terry got his customary 18 minutes as well. What a time to be alive. The New Orleans Pelicans and the Indiana Pacers. Anthony Davis suffered multiple injuries in this one. He fell on his hip again, had a thumb issue. He was ruled out for the remainder of the game. We don't have any updates to say if he's going to miss any time moving forward. X-rays were negative, I believe, but we haven't heard if he's going to miss any time moving forward. He had 16 and 3 in his 23 minutes. And after playing well the last 2 games, Terrence Jones was moved to the bench to this game. And this is what I talk about with Gentry and with Jones all the time, is that Gentry could make weird decisions and Jones is not that good. So he will find it hard to stick in a role. Now, obviously, if you picked him up with Davis hurting, you hold on to Terrence and you see what goes on. 15, 8 and 3 for Jones here with 2 blocks in 26 minutes. And some of that extra run came because Davis got hurt. Instead of starting Jones, Alvin Gentry went back to Dante Cunningham, and Dante Cunningham and Solomon Hill started at the 3 and the 4. They played 61 minutes combined and scored 7 points between them. No wonder you lost, and you failed to score 100 points, 98 to 95 to have against the Pacers. To have 2 guys play 61 minutes and fail to crack 5 points each, or to have neither of them score 5 points is it's not ideal. Bud Hield starting, but his minutes have been well down recently. 15 minutes here for Bud, 10 and 4 with 2 triples. Yeah, shot the ball well, but still didn't give him extra playing time. That went to Etuan Moore and Langston Galloway, who played 28 and 24 minutes respectively. A good game from Moore, 15 and 3 with 2 steals, so 1 steal and 2 blocks. He's more a guy that is a 14 to 16 team league guy, but Tyreek Evans should be owned in all of them. 23 minutes for Tyreek, 12, 5 and 4 with 2 steals. And continuing to rack up numbers that make us think if he gets to 31 minutes or 32 minutes, he's going to be blowing up and he's going to be putting up top 50 numbers. That might be a stretch for him to get that much playing time, but it's not ridiculous, I don't believe. Tim Frazier also saw some action here, 5 minutes for 1 rebound. Not a great Tim Frazier performance, and he has obviously completely dropped off the radar. For the Pacers, Thad Young had 6 steals to go with his 17 points in 37 minutes. He's always been known as one of the best steals merchants as a power forward, and that was a little bit in danger at the start of the year, but he's ramping it up recently. Jeffy Teague had 16, 8 and 10, while Paul George went 19, 5 and 6 with 2 steals and 2 threes. People are very into criticising Paul George this season. I'm one of them. I don't really like Paul George, and for numerous reasons, but people criticise him saying he's been a bust this year. He's still the 16th ranked player. So for a guy that you probably picked at 12 to 15 to come in ranked 16th, it should be pretty much exactly what you wanted. That's the sort of zone that you would hope that guy would fall into. He's had his moments. Definitely, he hasn't had as many explosive type performances, and he has jumped back a little bit in some areas. But I don't think he hasn't been as much of a bust as what some of the common thought processes have been with him. Miles Turner had a big one as well, 18 and 12 with 4 blocks in 38 minutes, and Al Jefferson chimed in with 10 points in under 10 minutes. Jefferson now is the 3rd string center again, as it should be, with Kevin Seraphin playing 11 minutes to Jefferson's 9.5. Also, Monte Ellis is still owned in 56% of leagues. It is too many. 2 points in 19 minutes for Monte. He did have 4 assists, a steal and a block, but his role is 20 to 21 minutes. That's it moving forward. Nothing is changing, and that could actually shrink when Rodney Stuckey returns, as he was out of this one again. He's likely out for another week, unfortunately for Rod. Just a guy that hasn't been able to get healthy this year at all. On to the Magic and the Nuggets. Lord Alfred Payton, only the 29 minutes here. This game was somewhat of a blowout with the Nuggets getting the big win, but Payton was still very productive. He took the most shots on the team, which is perhaps somewhat surprising. 9 of 17, that's 53%. 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 12 assists. So still a big night, while DJ Augustine scored 14 points in his 19 minutes. Obviously, he is just a deeper league sort of player. Bismack Biyombo, this is his best game in quite a while. Under 20 minutes still. 15 and 9 on 7 of 9 shooting. I wouldn't be getting hyped for it. I wouldn't be getting excited. I'd leave him for 16 team leagues, while Nick Vucevic had 17 and 4 in his 28 minutes. A so-so Serge Ibaka night, 15 and 5, no blocks and 3 triples, while Jody Meeks started in place of Evan Fournier, although the official NBA box scores say that Fournier played 11 seconds. I have no idea why it says that. It says it on our side, but it also comes from the official NBA side as well. That obviously needs to be changed because he did not play. Meeks played 34 minutes, 11, 4 and 4 with a 3 in those 34 minutes, while Fournier is out, which is probably not going to be too much longer. I would imagine Meeks can have 14 to 16 team league value, but that's it. The Aaron Gordon Magical Mystery Tour continued. 28 minutes for Gordo, 4 and 4 with two assists and 2 steals. Just continues to confound us with confusing production. Still should be owned, but this is just what it's going to be. 20 points, 2 points. And you're just going to have to live through this roller coaster of Aaron Gordon this season. For the Nuggets, I've already talked Jokic, I've already talked Moutier. Will Barton played only 24 minutes, and people might be a little bit surprised about that, but he was battling a very high fever, so that's why he didn't absorb a lot of Gaz Harris's minutes. Harris lasted just 3 minutes before succumbing to that ankle sprain, and Barton had 11 points in his 24. With Barton struggling, with Harris out, Jameer Nelson played 32 minutes. He had 18, 4 and 4 with a steal and 2 triples. Barton and Nelson are both worthwhile looks if Harris happens to miss time, which I think he misses at least one game. I would prioritise Barton over Nelson, but I could completely understand you going with Jameer in that situation. This was a game that Darrell Arthur was out and Wilson Chandler battled foul trouble. So Ken Fareed played 33 minutes and had 20 points, 5 rebounds, a steal and a block. You might think that I hate Fareed. I don't hate him. I just don't think he's that good a player. But him playing with Jokic is actually a very good pairing. So I've got no issue even if they started Fareed next to Jokic, I wouldn't have a problem with it because I think that he can succeed when he plays with Jokic. He's not someone... He's still owned in 70% of leagues, which is baffling to me. I can't understand. He's owned in 70% while Cody Zeller's in 50%. That is not something that should continue. But yeah, Fareed can have some value for even 14 to 16 team leagues, especially if they move him away from being a backup center and start playing him more at the 4 and playing some of those minutes behind Wilson Chandler, which is something they hadn't really gone to up until today. The Rooster had 15 and 6 in 40 minutes. A decent performance, but nothing too sexy or spectacular there. Charlotte and Boston. Kemba Walker, he was doing everything in this one. Couldn't get the victory in the end, though. 24, 4 and 2 for Kemba in his 38 minutes, while Nick Batum played 37 minutes and was horrific. Shooting 2 of 11 from the field for 8 points. But he had one of those rare double-doubles that don't include points. 10 rebounds, 10 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks, and was 4 of 5 from the line. So overall, a very nice performance, but the field goal percentage was impactfully bad. Big Marv Williams night as well, 21 and 4 in his 29 minutes, including 3 triples. No other stats though from Marv, so that's fine. He's still an okay 12-team league guy with limited upside, while Cody Zeller had 13 and 8 with a block on 71% shooting in 31 minutes. He is owned in, he's owned in under 50% of leagues. He should be owned in all 12ers. The interesting development here was that Spencer Hawes played backup center ahead of Roy Hibbert, who was a DNP CD. Hawes had 17 minutes, 6 points, 3 rebounds, and a steal. That makes him a 20-team league guy worth looking at, while Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is getting extra minutes with Marco Bellinelli being limited still, and by Jeremy Lamb being out. 35 minutes for MKG, 6 and 9. Nothing to really see there for 12-team formats. For the Celtics, Isaiah Thomas was added again, scoring 17 points in the fourth quarter. He had 35 points in total, 7 triples, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and amazingly did not take a single free throw. So his weird season just continues. 56% shooting from the field in this one. At some point it is going to have to end his ability to shoot at this higher level, but for now you just ride it and you just really enjoy it. Jay Crowder had it going as well. Another 3 triples for Jay. 15 points in 30 minutes, 7 rebounds, a steal and a block, while Al Horford had 22, 6 and 4. The big news fantasy-wise is not only the return of Avery Bradley, who stunk 5-3 and 3 in 33 minutes, not the demotion of Marcus Smart, who had 2, 5 and 4 with 2 steals and a block and remains a punt field goal must own. But it's the play of Kelly Olynyk. 26 minutes for Kelly Olynyk, 15 and 9, 2 threes, 4 assists and a steal. That is 2 monster games in a row for Olynyk. He does have insanely high potential if he gets enough minutes. Much like with Jason Kidd, it's hard to put much faith in Brad Stevens giving those minutes. But if you've got an expendable roster spot, go and grab him and see exactly what goes on here. Yes, Tyler Zeller's been out with this infection for the last 2 weeks. Zeller wasn't a guy that was in the rotation every night anyway, so I don't think that Zeller's coming back and pushing Olynyk back down to 18 minutes a night. Zeller was in and out of the rotation. He missed some time before he was ill anyway, but yes, he has been out for this last 8-game stretch that Olynyk's been playing fairly well. I'm not sure it's a complete correlation though. Just because, again, Zeller wasn't an every-night rotation guy. Amir Johnson played 21 minutes. Jonas Jerebko played 14. There's no reason that Zeller should play really ever at all. I love what Olynyk does for this team. I love the way he combines with Horford, and obviously he's got great fantasy numbers when he gets those minutes. It's just being able to guarantee a decent amount of minutes, which is the struggle at this point. The Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors, just an absolute smashing. The Warriors beat them 126-91. Kevin Love did not play in the second half due to back tightness. He said it's fine and he'll be back for the next game. So this game was so over at halftime that even any little thing that happened, he goes, oh, my back's sore. Like, don't worry about it, Kev. Like, there's no need for you to play. Like, this game is done. Just sit it out. LeBron had 20 and 8 in 35 minutes, while Kyrie had 17, 2 and 2 in 29 minutes. And not a lot to really see there. Kyle Korver played 27 minutes, had 11 points and 3 triples, 2 rebounds and not much else, and that's probably where he sits, I reckon, for majority of this year. Had some problems defensively against Golden State, and that's going to be a 14-team league sort of guy. Well, Iman Shumpert started his second consecutive game, went 15 and 9, had 3 steals and had 2 triples. This is getting back to the Iman Shumpert we saw to begin the season. I don't really think that there's any 12-team value in looking at him, but you could do a lot worse than streaming him in for some threes and steals. Tristan Thompson had 4 blocks, but not a lot else. I wouldn't get too excited about Tristan. He is still a 12-team league guy for certain builds and certain builds only. For the Warriors, Steph, Kev, and Clay all scored over 20 points. Curry had 22 and 11 with 4 steals. Durant went 21, 6 and 5 with 3 triples, 2 steals, and 3 blocks, and Clay hit 5 triples on his way to 26 points. But the play of Andre Iguodala probably the most surprising. 14 points on a perfect 5 of 5 shooting. He had 5 assists, a block, and 2 triples, and that's great, but it feels as much of a mirage as anything that we saw in all of Monday's action. He just isn't a guy that should even be sniffing 14 or even 16-team leagues most of the time. Zaza Pachulia, another decent night, 13 boards in 21 minutes. He is becoming a 14-team league guy and a streamable 12-team league guy, and he's been doing that over the last 2 weeks or so, putting up some relatively impressive numbers. If we move on to the next game, which is the Utah Jazz, they took on the Phoenix Suns. The Jazz get the victory in the end, 106-101. Rudy Gobert, 18 and 17 in 36 minutes, had a steal, had 4 blocks, including the game-saving block. Not really sure why the Suns would even attack him on a game-winning try. He's just been fantastic this season. Well, Joe Ingles started in place of Rod Hood, who is going to be out for, it looks like, 2 weeks at this point for Rod. 34 minutes for Ingles, 11, 2 and 5, 2 steals and 3 triples. Ingles has short-term value to add, even in 12-team leagues, I believe, if they play him 34 a night, which has been the pattern when Hood has been out. Joe Johnson had 15 and 4 in 24 minutes. He comes into maybe a 14 to 16-team league guy, while unfortunately George Hill hurt his ankle at the end of the game. It was right at the end. I don't have an update at this point. Tony Jones of the Salt Lake Tribune said that he saw George walking around after the game and he didn't really have much of a limp, so that's a positive, but this is George Hill, so who knows how long this is going to be. If he is out, Shelvin Mack might be the guy, but he has been a DNP CD the last 2 games, Mack. Dante Exum and Alec Burks handling the backup role. Now, previously, when Hill had been out, Exum would start and Mack would play 30 minutes. He wasn't the strongest of ads, so depending on who I'm looking at dropping, I wouldn't be rushing to grab Exum, nor would I be rushing to grab Shelvin Mack in that scenario. 11 and 4 with a steal and a block for Derek Favors in just 24 minutes, which is obviously frustrating with the minutes, but still decent enough production to hold him, and 17, 4 and 5 for Gordie Hayward. Eric Bledsoe was a monster for the Suns, 31, 9 and 9, 2 triples, 1 steal. Yeah, super efficient, 11 of 20 from the field, 7 of 7 from the line. A real huge night. Well, this was Devin Booker in a nutshell. 25 points. Well, no, not really, because he's been better than this recently, but 25 points on 10 of 22 shooting. He hit 1 3, and then he proceeded to have 0 assists. No, let me try that again. He had 0 rebounds, 1 assist, 0 steals, 0 blocks. So a very weird and very empty stat line from Devin Booker. He did play 46 of the 48 minutes in this game, which is obviously a huge load, but he's a young guy. Hopefully he can stick it out. But that's 3 big scoring nights in a row from Booker. You just would hope for something aside from scoring, which you didn't get in this game. Marquise Chris played 22 minutes. Foul trouble limiting him again, 5 and 3. This was a game where Tyson Chandler was ruled out fairly early, and then Brandon Knight was said that he was playing, and then he was ruled out. So Earl Watson coming out with, we fully expect Brandon to play. 10 minutes later, Brandon Knight out. Cool. I don't know if this is one of a standard from shit franchises trying to pull wool over eyes. Could be, but it only seems to happen with the worst teams. As for starting in place of Chandler, it was Alex Len. He only got 21 minutes. He scored 6 points with 5 rebounds and 2 blocks, while Dragon Bender played the most out of their big men, which is something I can totally get behind. 25 minutes for Bender, 5 and 4 with 2 blocks and a 3. Nothing that exciting there, but obviously there is a chance that he becomes a standard league guy. If you're owning Alex Len in any 12-team leagues, I would not be holding on to him. Yeah, even in a game here without Chandler, he couldn't get big playing time, and in the previous games, he was playing like 6 or 8 minutes in games, which is obviously not enough to be impactful. TJ Warren played more than PJ Tucker. That's a good sign. 15 points on 5 of 7 shooting, while Tucker grabbed 13 boards with 2 steals in 27 minutes. PJ, still a 12-team league guy, I believe. PJ Tucker, who's a 14 to 16 team league sort of a player. All right, and that's it for the action. Like I said, the Oklahoma City game versus the Clippers has not finished yet. But what I can report is that Chris Paul, before halftime, had to go to the locker room. Word came out that he's suffering a sprained thumb, and X-rays are negative. He looked pretty disappointed heading into the tunnel, kicking chairs. Now remember, an X-ray rules out a break. It doesn't rule out ligament tears, so it could still be a serious injury. Austin Rivers and Ray Felton are the 2 players to grab. Rivers has value as it is, but Felton's a guy who could jump up and become a standard league type of a player if he was forced into a starting role, which you would almost think at this point it's a guarantee if Paul's going to have to miss time, which I think that he is going to have to miss time. So Rivers and Felton are 2 guys that you can definitely take a peek at. Let's have a look at the... I'm trying to get some updated stats here, but things are going very slowly on my computer to see exactly if anything interesting is happening in that game. But yeah, I would say almost definitely Chris Paul has to miss some playing time. So therefore, we look at Rivers, and then we look at who's am I talking? Oh, yeah, Ray Felton is the other guy who's going to take some extra playing time in that situation. Let's have a look. Have we loaded back up? No, things are going too slowly. All right, let's take a break now, and then we'll be back to preview the Tuesday games, where there are 5 of them, from a DFS point of view.
Now I had a dream of you on that cold September night. I had nothing left to look forward to. I thought you were all I wanted, but I never really knew just what you could do. Never want to leave you, 'cause I think it's worth to be alone. Times like this I wonder if I'd be better on my own. The constant torture of this love, something I just disown.
Alright guys, we're back. As I said, the games have not finished due to some life circumstances that are coming up on my end, taking my son out to the cricket tonight to watch that, and the podcast, not to mention that it will be about midnight by the time I get home and ready to go and then record, and then the show comes out extraordinarily late, so I'm doing it without the end of that OKC Clippers game. The Clippers have got that well in hand at the moment, so let's move on to the 5 games that we're looking at for Tuesday. The first one is Houston and Miami. The Rockets are favoured here, as you would expect them to be. They're favoured by 7.5, and the total here is 220 points. Clint Capella is questionable to return in this game, so obviously the status of Capella impacts what we do with the table. Montrezl Harrell. Willie Reed is probable for Miami, but the Capella one is big. I don't imagine Capella coming back and playing 25 minutes straight off, but I think he comes back and plays enough minutes that it takes Harrell off the table. And in terms of what happens moving forward, it's going to be a real interesting scenario to see exactly how D'Antoni deploys them. Even before the injury, D'Antoni was starting to limit Capella and get Harrell into games more. So that could be something that happens, and we might see a situation where the 3 centers play 16 or 17 minutes each, or Nene plays 12 and Capella and Harrell play 18 apiece. It's a real possibility, and that's something I am worried about from a season-long perspective as well. At point guard, you know what, there's not massive gobs of value in this game. There is some things, but there's not massive ones. If Capella is out, the table at 5,300 will be someone that we'd be looking at. But with Capella likely or questionable to play, then it's hard to go with him. Let's talk point guards. Goran Dragic is at 6,700. Pat Beverley defense, I don't think 6,700 is a reasonable salary. He's averaging under 29 points over the last 5 games, so I'm not loving that. On DraftKings, he's at 3,800. Sorry, I wish it was 38. He's at 6,800. He's been putting up a bit better numbers over there, but still not enough to really turn him into a guy that I'm super infatuated with. Pat Beverley had a nice bounce back last game. He's at 5,300. He scored 37 in that last game, but had struggled prior to that. I think the Heat are a negative matchup for point guards. I think Beverley is okay at that salary. For him to get 27 points doesn't feel like a huge stretch, but there are better options that are out there on the board. Tyler Johnson at 6,400 is just way too expensive for me. No interest in that. But at 5,600 on DraftKings, I could consider him a GPP guy, but really not a huge upside one. Shooting guard, Dion Waiters at 5,200. He's playing the minutes, he's taking the shots, but it's not necessarily translating into great DFS stats. He's at 5,300 on both sides. He's had a price rise, so that sort of turns me off using Dion, while Eric Gordon's at 5,800. I think Gordon's a good cash option here. It should get you close to 30 points, which at that sort of salary is exactly what you want to do. Maybe not quite as favourable at 5,800 on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, I'm a little bit happier with him. Jimmy Harden is at 12,300 on FanDuel. He's at 12,200 on DraftKings. On a slate like this, I think not having Harden in cash is going to be tough. In GPPs, I can totally understand going away from him. His record against the Heat is not superb. His numbers recently haven't been living up to 12,300, but a lot of people are going to be owning him, but I can totally understand a scenario where you fade Harden just because that salary is so high, and he hasn't been producing to that level over the last few games, averaging just 49 over the last 3. And I say just 49, but at $12,000, that is just 49. That's nowhere near enough at that sort of extended salary. Trevor Ariza had a big one against the Nets. The Heat are a slightly different proposition, despite being as bad, if not worse than the Nets. They're not worse, but they're pretty bad. Their defense is a lot different. 5,800 for Trev Ariza is all right, but again, it just doesn't really get me excited at all. Power forward James Johnson at 5,900 is too high. I think 6,100 on DraftKings also too high. Yeah, you know what? He's been putting up great numbers, but my trust in him to get that is not high, and his upside at that price is also not high. So that rules him out of both cash and tournaments in my mind. Ryan Anderson is always a GPP only guy. It's a negative matchup for him, but at $5,000 when he can easily go for 35, and at 5,100 on DraftKings, then I think that he is a fine GPP guy. In fact, one of the poster boys or dictionary definitions for GPP type of plays. Not that GPP play is something that's listed in the dictionary, but I hope you get the gist of it. At centre, Hassan Whiteside, 8,900. This is a good matchup for Whiteside. I think that you should be looking at 40 plus fairly comfortably for him here. 8,400 on DraftKings. No problem with using Whiteside on both sides in both formats, where, as I mentioned before, with the Houston centres, it does come down to if Capella plays. If he's out, it's all the table. If Capella is in, I don't think any of them are really worth too much of a hard look. Let's go on to the next game now. We're talking the Toronto Raptors and the Brooklyn Nets. So the matchup sounds fantastic for Toronto. You've got one of the easiest defenses to play against. You've got a 227-point total. But the Raptors are favoured by 11, and a smashing is really on the cards here. And if that happens, then we get limited minutes for DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry. Damari Carroll loses some playing time as well. So that impacts it. So that makes it harder to use some of these guys in cash games. Pat Patterson is questionable. I imagine Patterson misses this one, and the Nets play Trevor Booker, Brook Lopez up front. I still think they go with Bebe Nogueira for the Raptors at power forward, and we get some extra run from Norm Powell, similar to what we saw in the last game. And that's the way that I do expect them to go. At point guard, Corey Joseph at 3,900. Blowout on the cards. Absolutely worth a look. He had 34 points the other day in a blowout game. And at 3,900, that's got great GPP upside, but there's nothing there to see for cash. Spencer Dinwiddie is not really worth it with Isaiah Whitehead back, and Whitehead's not worth it either. At point guard as well. Kyle Lowry is at 9,000. You love the matchup. It looks superb, but the restriction or the potential restriction in minutes probably leaves him to me to be a GPP only guy. Yes, if you're struggling to fit a guy into cash, he should be able to get you at least 40 points or around 38 maybe, that sort of mark. But GPP, he can get 50 if somehow the Nets keep it close and he's forced to play 35, 36 minutes, which feels like a long shot at this point. Shawnee Kilpatrick, he's a GPP target, but he has really been struggling lately, while DeMar DeRozan at shooting guard, same story as Lowry. He's at 9,400 over on FanDuel, which is expensive. He can easily get it if the game stays close, but that's the problem. At 8,500 on DraftKings, yeah, that's a better price, and I feel a lot better about it over on DraftKings rather than the extra $1,000 over on FanDuel. Another name to look at as a GPP punt is Joe Harris. He's at minimum salary on DraftKings $3,000, and he's averaging 20 points over the last 3 games. So you get 20 points at $3,000, it's clearly value. So he is absolutely worth just a sneaky peek without getting too excited. And Norm Powell, who had 22 in the last game, he's at 3,600. I think Norm Powell's an absolute GPP option as well, just for that ability. If Patterson's in, I think it's harder to use Powell. But if Patterson is out, I think we see some extra Norm, and he can make that value back. Small forward Terry Ross at 3,700. Great matchup. We saw Trevor Ariza go off against this team the other day. Yeah, Ross can really get hot. He's probably more a GPP guy than a risky cash play, but that is a very low salary for Ross. 3,600 on DraftKings as well. I would be not shocked if he got 25 points, and that's obviously returning some pretty good value. Bojan Bogdanovic is always GPP only, and Damari Carroll at 4,600, and Carroll's at 52 on DraftKings. I'll pass on that at 52 on DraftKings. 46 on FanDuel, just with the risk of him being limited with minutes, makes it slightly risky, but I still do think that he is worth looking at, and I would even consider him in cash on FanDuel. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson had a big game in the last one, 26 points there, but I still don't have full faith in that being something I'm all that keen on. Power forward Trevor Booker, 5,500, 31 points the last time out for the Nets. Yeah, that's good. Obviously at 5,500, but the Raptors are not that easy to go up against generally for big men. So he's in a player pool, but he's not a strong guy to look at. I love Jonas Valanciunas here at 6,000. I think that even if it is a blowout, they don't limit him a huge amount. They still will play him 27 to 28 minutes, and he should be able to get a double-double in his sleep in this matchup. So Jonas is worth a look. At 62 on DraftKings, I'm not quite as into it, but I am still thinking it's a positive one. Whereas his opponent, Brook Lopez, is at 7,000 on FanDuel. He's at 63 on DraftKings. 7,000 on FanDuel? Yeah, not bad. 63 on DraftKings? Yep. All about Brook Lopez on DraftKings at only 6,300, and he's got a really good record against the Raptors as well. As for Bebe, he's at 3,800 on FanDuel. He is at 4,100 on DraftKings. That's very, very unappealing on DraftKings. But on FanDuel, at that price, I can see using him as a GPP guy, but you would only be looking as a GPP option, and that is it. All right, let's move on to the next game now, and that is the Dallas Mavericks. They're taking on the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls are favored by 5.5. The total is a paltry 196.5. For reference, the next lowest total is only 202, so the Bulls are 6 points below that, and they are 30 points below, or 31 points below the Nuggets-Lakers matchup, so it's such a huge difference. Nick Mirotic is listed as questionable with that illness that's cost him the last 3 or 4 games. Let's talk point guards here. Michael Carter-Williams had a really good performance in the last one for the Bulls. He's at 4,700, and he put up 29 points. Now, we know the Mavericks are a poor team to go up against as a point guard. Pace factors into that somewhat as well. So, Carter Williams I would look at as a GPP guy, and I would not feel comfortable with it in a tournament setting, whereas Darren Williams, he just continually feels like he's too highly priced. He's 6,400 on FanDuel, Darren, and if we look at him over on DraftKings, he's at 5,900. At 5,900 I can get behind, I can use that on DraftKings. The 6,400 on FanDuel, I'm not a fan of that. Rajon Rondo, just don't see him getting enough minutes now. Same with JJ Barea. I don't think the playing time's there for them. Seth Curry's at 3,900. He starts. He played 30 minutes in the last game. He had 15 points. He is averaging just 14 points over the last 5 games, with most of those being starts. And at 3,900 for Seth, you could look at it as a GPP situation, but that is literally all I would be considering Seth Curry for. I'm not keen on him in any cash game situation. Dwayne Wade at 7,000, that just feels too high in a slow-paced negative matchup. Won't be investing there. 6,500 for Dwayno on DraftKings as well. I think it's probably a little high. Wesley Matthews at 5,500, dropped 30 in the last game. That's not bad. 5,000 on DraftKings. Yeah, not a bad salary. I think that he is absolutely worth a GPP look and should be put into a player pool, especially against these Bulls. Small forward Jim Butler, 9,500. For as well as he's played, he is still averaging just 36 points over the last 3, but one of those games was the game where he was sick and got nothing going whatsoever. So you're going to take somewhat of a grain of salt into those numbers. But that salary is so high that only if you've just got extra cash left over would you put him in. Now, there aren't any real great high-priced small forwards out there. Butler can obviously do it, and he can have 50 points, but there is an element of risk associated with Jim or using Jim in this matchup. As for the pencil, Harrison Barnes, he's at 6,800. That's too highly priced for me. I do not like that at all. And he's at 64 on DraftKings. I'll say the same thing. Nothing to love there. Dougie McDermott dropped 41 in the last game. If you think that's a fluke, you're with me. He's at $4,000. Yeah, there might be some GPP upside there, but Dwayne Wade is back, so we're not going to have those shots going to Doug. The minutes will likely be reduced, and he just hasn't shown an ability to do that consistently enough, so I just don't really buy into using Doug there. Nick Mirotic at 4,200. Well, we just don't know if he's going to play. The salary is appealing, but not interested in him. Dirk at 5,700 though, I do like. That's on FanDuel. At 61 on DraftKings, I'm not as keen. But 57 for Dirk on FanDuel, I think there is definitely some value there. He's averaging 33 across the last 3, and Bulls big men, they do allow some boosts in scoring. So have a look there. Taj Gibson at 5,100. He has been much better recently, putting up some big games. You love using Taj. I think you've got a little bit of extra cash to play around with there. On DraftKings at 5,700, I'll say not so much. He's still been relatively good, but that's extra money on a site with a lower salary cap. Yeah, not as pleasing. At center, Robin Lopez at 4,400. The minutes are back. The production is solid, but there is still a risk associated with him. He's 42 on DraftKings. He also had one of the greatest hashtags ever yesterday. He tweeted out now. What was the hashtag? I wish I had remembered it. I would like a fresh plum served in perfume. What was it? No, I would like a fresh plum floating in perfume served in a man's hat with his hashtag yesterday, which is a Simpsons reference. And just really one of the more humorous hashtags that I'd seen. As for his fantasy value, yeah, I think he's good to use here. There's a fair bit of value in that price tag. Chris Felicio, minimum salary, he's a GPP only type of guy. $3,000 for a guy that can go for 30 points. It's hard to go past that in terms of upside on this limited slate. Salah Mejri at 3,600. Yeah, it's 3,600 FanDuel price, 3,000 DraftKings. I would probably rather take Felicio, but Mejri is definitely an option with Bogut out. They could decide to run him a little bit more to try and combat Gibson and Lopez. I could see that potentially going down, and that would make Mejri a very low-owned pivot play in tournaments, I believe. All right, let's move on to the next game. We're going to talk Minnesota. They're taking on the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs are favoured by 11, and the total here is 202 points. Pat Mills missed the last game with tightness in his left calf. He has been upgraded to probable, while DeJounte Murray, who missed the last game with an ankle problem, has been ruled out of this one already. At point guard, Tone Parker was forced into 31 minutes in the last game. It gave you just 18 points, so I don't really see there's any use in using him, whereas Rick Rubio has been crushing it. He's at $6,000, a little bit of a down performance in the last game, which dropped his salary by $500, but we shouldn't be complaining there. The matchup against the Spurs, though, is probably a reason where I'm probably not going to be investing $6,000 in Rick Rubio. I would consider it in the GPP. There is upside there, but not enough in cash. Pat Mills is not really worth a look either. Danny Green at $3,500 for a shooting guard. He is strictly a GPP guy, and he has been producing nothing. In fact, this game offers so little for fantasy that I'm just not, for DFS, I'm just not all that keen on much happening here. Zachary Levine at $6,000. GPP, that's it. No cash play there. Small forwards. Kawhi is at 8,800. Now that's one that I can probably look at if you don't want to take Jim Butler. you can definitely consider Kawhi, who is averaging 46 over the last 3. There can be definitely some value in Kawhi. I think he is a solid play at the small forward position. If we look at him on DraftKings at 8,800, the same story. Really no issue with using him. Wigo is surprisingly averaging 32 points over the last 3. He's at 6,500, but we know the story with Wiggins. He is up and down, and I would consider him a GPP guy, except his highest score in the last 5 is just 35 points. It's not a very high score, considering how inconsistent he can be. I would still consider him a GPP guy because he can go off. Power forwards, Gorgie Jeng had a big game in the last one. The Spurs matchup is very, very far from a positive, and he's at 5,200 on DraftKings, so that's probably a stay away on DraftKings and not a fantastic play on FanDuel. Whereas LaMarcus Aldridge at 7,100 has really struggled to reach those heights of late as well, so I'm not feeling that he is a very strong option here either. At centre, Pau Gasol, 6,400. I think there's a good spot for Pau. He does have a good record against Minnesota. His recent games haven't been fantastic, and that salary is high, but I would consider him a GPP pivoty type of player. And Karl Towns, 9,400 on FanDuel. I don't really love it on FanDuel. I'm a bit keener on DraftKings at 9,300, but still, he still is at a risk of not returning value. But I do get the feeling that this slate on Tuesday is going to be a low-scoring one, so I don't think that getting 5x or 5.5x is going to be mandatory. I think you're going to see some low scores. So a guy like Towns getting just bulk numbers in there, same with Butler, same with Leonard, even though their ratios and value may not look fantastic, it still can be useful in those type of scenarios. All right, let's move on now to the last game of the night. We are looking at the Denver Nuggets and the Los Angeles Lakers. This is the highest spread, or highest total of the night, 228, and the Lakers are favored by 1.5. We've got to check the status of Gaz Harris. I don't think he plays. We've got him listed as doubtful. Will Barton, who did play through a fever on Monday, he should be ready to go. And then for the Lakers, we've got Jordy Clarkson, who's questionable after spraining his ankle. Tariq Black sprained his ankle. He is also questionable. And for the Nuggets, Darrell Arthur, who's missed today's game with leg soreness. So a few scenarios there we need to look into. The Clarkson one, if he is out, that boosts Lou Williams and Uncle P. If Darrell Arthur is out, it's more boost for Wilson Chandler and Ken Fareed, so bear those in mind. And again, you can use our scenarios over on Basketball Monster. At point guard, Jameer Nelson at 3,600. I think that is a great play. It's one of the better plays of the entire day, I believe. Not that he's going to necessarily be playing point guard that whole time, but he's going to be getting a lot of minutes at the 2 alongside Moutier with Gary Harris likely to be out. So that is something that you can definitely pay attention to at that price. Really, really enjoy him at that salary. 6,000 for D'Angelo Russell, a great matchup for him. His numbers have been a little down in the last couple, but still put up 30 points in the last game at 26 minutes. You really should be looking to exceed 30 in this one. I don't have any issue considering D'Angelo Russell. And Manny Moutier at 4,500. Dropped a really some big performances in his last couple of games. No issue with considering him. He's a little bit risky in cash, but the matchup is a positive. With Harris likely out, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to see more of Nelson at the 2, meaning less chance for him to split minutes at the 1. So I feel pretty good about Moutier in both formats, but probably a little bit safer with him in a tournament, but absolutely no problem even considering him in cash. Jordy Clarkson, if he plays, not really sure that he's got some upside, but not enough to make him a great option, especially on the last game of the night when he's listed as questionable. Will Barton, if we find out that he's ready to go, he's at 4,800. He becomes a good option with the Gary Harris injury. Of course, he can come in there and he can easily exceed 30 points at under $5,000. There's a lot of value that can be had from Barton. That would take something away from Jameer, but I still think they can both get close to 30 minutes, and that's going to enable both of those players to have value. So Will Barton at 4,800 is fine. Lou Williams at 4,600. I think Williams, if Jordy Clarkson is out, Lou Williams becomes a really great cash play. If Clarkson is in, then Lou Williams becomes a GPP guy only. He's 4,300 on DraftKings, which is a solid price, but it does somewhat depend on what Jordy Clarkson is able to do in terms of health-wise. Uncle P at 3,700, just a GPP guy, even if Clarkson happens to be out. I wouldn't be happy using him in cash. He just relies on his shot, which has completely disappeared recently. Lou Deng at 4,200. Lou is just a punt option at that small forward. He's had some big games. He's had some absolute invisible sort of performances. So that does make him somewhat risky, but that's exactly what GPPs are all about. While Wilson Chandler at 5,800 is decent. I think at 5,800 on FanDuel, that's a good price, but it does really rise up if Darrell Arthur is out. Now on DraftKings, he's at 6,700, which is a nightmare price, and that's not something that should be really entered into. The Roosters at 5,900. He would also get somewhat of a boost if Darrell Arthur is out. I'm not 100% feeling him, but it is a good matchup for him, so no issue with using the Rooster there. And Brandon Ingram's probably a tough one to use, especially at $4,000. Minimum salary, I'd consider him GPP, but he's not. Julius Randle at 6,200. He is averaging a paltry 23 points over the last 3 and is in that Julius Randle slump phase. I think this is a great time to get on him. A good matchup defensively against the Nuggets. He has done this for a few games. He slumps, and then he comes back and puts up a couple of strong ones in a row. I reckon I just get the gut feel and matchup-based premonition that this is going to be a pretty decent performance from Julius, so I do like that. And Ken Fareed at 4,300. I really like Fareed if Darrell Arthur happens to be up, but even then there is a risk associated with it, so I'd consider him probably just a GPP type of player. Nick Jokic, 8,500. The salary keeps rising, but it doesn't really seem to matter. He's at 81 on DraftKings. He's continually crushing it. He's averaging 44 over the last 5 games. No issue with using Jokic. And again, it's a great matchup for him as well. Love this guy. He just continues to put up numbers. Cash and GPPs, no issue with Jokic at all. If Darrell Arthur happens to play, I think he's a great sneaky GPP guy, and I would feel okay with him if they say he's playing and starting. Even at cash, at that minimum salary type number, get me 18, 19 points, and then I can fit in Towns, I can fit in Butler, I can maybe fit in Kawhi, those sort of guys to help boost my raw score up. The centers, yeah, nothing to see there with the centers. All right, let's head into the picks of the day now. Over on FanDuel, Jameer Nelson's at 3,600, D'Angelo Russell is at 6,000, and Kyle Lowry at 9,000. Shooting guards, Farton Will Barton's at 48, Eric Gordon 58, and Jimmy Harden 12.3. Small forwards, Terry Ross 37, Wilson Chandler 58, and Jim Butler at 95. At power forward, Darrell Arthur 36, Taj Gibson's at 51, and at centre, Robin Lopez 44, Jonas Valanciunas 6,000, and Hassan Whiteside 8,900. On DraftKings, Jameer Nelson 31, D'Angelo Russell 7,000, and James Harden 12,200. Shooting guard, Lou Williams 43, Barton 56, and Butler 91. Small forward, Terry Ross 36, the Roosters at 6,000, and Kawhi Leonard's at 88. Power forward, Ken Fareed 44, Trevor Booker 54, and Towns is at 9.3. And the centres, Robin Lopez 42, Brook Lopez 63, and Jokic at 8,100. Let's move on to the Aussie sites now. Moneyball, Jameer Nelson 3,500, D'Angelo Russell 61, and Kyle Lowry 94. Shooting guard, Barton 47, Wes Matthews 5,000, and Harden 12.2. Small forward, Terry Ross 36, the Rooster 57, and Kawhi's at 88. Power forward, Dirk is at 48, Jokic is at 75, and at centre, Robin Lopez 46, Jonas Valanciunas at 61, and Hassan Whiteside 86. On Draft Stars, Jameer Nelson 65, D'Angelo Russell 12.850, and Kyle Lowry 16.650. Shooting guard, Terry Ross 5.850, Lou Williams 95, and DeMar DeRozan 52. At small forward, Damari Carroll 8,000, Will Barton 10,000, and Kawhi is at 16.150. The power forwards, Luol Deng 7.350, Nick Jokic 13.4, and at centre, Bebe is at 6.450, Brook Lopez 13,000, and Hassan Whiteside 15.950. We are done for today's show, I hope there's more than one person listening and watching. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball, and check out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network for information about your favorite NBA team. Check out Locked On Clippers with a new host, Lucas Hahn, who will be having all the information about the Chris Paul injury. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Mindaugas Kuzminskas.